Hello and welcome to Runkle of the Bailey. My name is Ian Runkle. I'm a Canadian criminal defense and firearms lawyer. It's been a while since I did a Scotch video, but this case has me so mad, and it's better to take a sip of Scotch than it is to scream something that might get me demonetized. Today we're going to talk about the case of Constable David Ahlstrom of the Edmonton Police Service. So Constable David Ahlstrom was charged and convicted with counts of theft and was sentenced to 18 months probation. This theft occurred while he was on duty as a police officer in the course of his duties. So let's have a look at this and the incredible way the system protects bad cops. So we're going to start by looking at the original discipline decision. So this is after he's convicted. This is a decision as to whether he'll be punished as a police officer. And we see the beginnings of how the system protects police officers right on the cover page of this, because this is listed as in the matter of a complaint against reg number XXXX Constable AB. But again, this is Constable David Ahlstrom, so these aren't even his initials. This is purely just anonymized to protect him. And in order to get this document, I had to file a Freedom of Information request. So these aren't just posted out there, and it doesn't have his name on it. I had to cross-reference what he did with what's in this document in order to figure out who he is. So this is shocking because this is a degree of protection from the public that the police enjoy with respect to their bad acts that is insane to me. So let's look at what exactly happened, because yeah, I'm going to skim over the allegations, or the charges. They include neglect of duty, they include discreditable conduct, they include insubordination. But really, we want to talk about the facts. But how did they come to the facts in this case? Well, that is via an agreed statement of facts. So instead of having a trial and a hearing to determine through calling evidence what happened, the sort of defense and the prosecution side basically filed a joint statement of, we agree that this is what happened. So consider that as we go, because there's going to be some discrepancies between this and some other things. So he pleads guilty to all of these things, and basically the only issue is what sort of punishment he'll get. So he testified about the October 2016 misconduct at a homicide crime scene where he had been detailed to provide scene security at the rear of a residence while awaiting the arrival of detectives. Now, they described this as a homicide crime scene. However, it is worth noting that this was a particularly horrific crime. What happened is a couple, husband and wife, were at home and people broke into their house. They tied them up, they beat them severely, and they murdered the husband. They were looking for money and drugs. They thought that they were targeting a specific place. They had the wrong house. This is purely a situation where they had the wrong place. They were not where they thought they would be, but they brutally murdered a couple. And so scene security means that this officer is there to protect this crime scene, to make sure no one enters and disturbs it. And because disturbing a crime scene can end up meaning that maybe it becomes impossible to solve the crime. Or if you do solve the crime and you do figure out who did it, it may become impossible to secure a conviction against those people because the crime scene was tampered with. He is endangering the whole administration of justice by what he's doing here. So, carrying on. He stated that he did what he was not supposed to do and went into the house and looked around. While going through some papers, he found $300 cash and put it in his pant pocket because he believed he should do something about it. What he should have done about it was leave it for the detectives, right? It's evidence. It's relevant potentially to the case. Don't freaking touch it. Keep your mitts off. He stated he got busy, and when he was leaving to go home at the end of his shift, he found the cash. He stated he told his sergeant and staff sergeant about what he did when he returned to work. He became aware that his presence in the house had been captured on a CCTV system, but was not concerned as he had already disclosed what he'd done. So that was what's in the agreed statement of facts at his disciplinary hearing. However, as I mentioned, he also had a criminal trial, and this was reported on by the CBC. And the CBC reported that the same day that he was stationed there to do this investigation, EPS homicide investigators emailed all employees some closed circuit TV images, camera images, to show the attackers in an attempt to identify them. And so that would have, of course, told him that there's CCTV there, that he's been caught on camera. That happened the same day. So quite frankly, I find this very suspect when he says, oh, I wasn't concerned as I'd already told them. Yeah, except you actually got that email the same day. My strong suspicion is that instead he takes the money, leaves, gets emailed something and is like, oh crap, I would have been caught on camera going in there. I better own up to this because I'm in a lot of trouble. So this is a very serious discrepancy between what we see in the disciplinary decision and what was in the criminal proceedings. And quite frankly, I don't like it one bit. All right, so he met with detectives at the house the next night and walked through what he had touched and where he had gone and what he'd done the night before. So that's just so that the detectives have some idea of what's been tampered with and how. Now, the other thing is that anytime somebody like a police officer does this, they should quite frankly jump to the top of the suspect list. Because why would you go into a crime scene where you know they're going to be checking for DNA and looking for fingerprints and so forth? Like, I'm not saying he was involved in this, but I am saying I would have also put him on the list of people we need to clear. Like, hey, you have an alibi now? I don't think he was involved in this, but I mean, this is something the detectives now have to consider. This guy has now made himself part of the case. And if they ever find the people, then this guy's going to be a major argument for the defense. As a defense lawyer, I would be arguing that any evidence in this case is contaminated by this officer's actions. So he was then transferred to the front counter where he remained until August 2017. Yeah, the reason why they transferred them there is because they knew that they couldn't trust him anymore. His only explanation for why he went in was that he was looking for the adrenaline rush of doing what he was not supposed to be doing, which is the worst thing for a police officer to have an urge to do, right? Policing is all about procedure. It's all about doing the right thing. And so if you've got an officer who has these urges to do the wrong thing, that's terrible. It's insane. So he testified that in May 2017, he was tasked to deliver an envelope downtown. Now, he doesn't know this. What's happening here is that the police actually suspect that he's a dirty cop. And to test this, they run stings on him. And now the police are having to take their attention off of, looking for crime in society in order to look for crime within their ranks. They have to try to determine if this guy's a dirty cop. So after delivering it, he was returning to his police vehicle when a person gave him a purse saying it had been left on a train and walked away. He went to the police vehicle. Now, that person who gave him the purse was an undercover police officer. Looked in the purse, found and removed some cash and gift cards, but did not locate any identification. And they knew exactly how much cash and what gift cards and so forth were in there because, again, this is a sting. He spent the cash, discarded the gift cards, and left the purse in the police vehicle. He did not make any notes, create an incident report, or exhibit the cash and cards, i.e., he stole this. He did crime. In August 2017, he was tasked to assist another unit with a search of a reported stolen vehicle. He opened the garage door to let the vehicle in and stood by while the other officers began a search. The others got a call and told him that they needed to leave and asked him to complete the search looking for identification and a cell phone. And I'm just going to note here as well, this was another sting operation. These other officers aren't getting a call. They're leaving him with the car because they want to test his reliability. They want to test if he's honest. And they know what's in this car already. They've planted everything, and they're waiting to see what he says he finds and what just ends up in his pockets magically. So he found some identification and called the other officers and was asked to search for the cell phone. He searched again and removed some cash and cigarettes, which he placed into his own truck in the parking lot and returned to work. After finishing his shift, and as he was leaving, He was arrested and taken to the Alberta Serious Incident Response Team offices, where he spoke to a lawyer, answered some questions. I don't know why he'd answer questions, but okay. And was released on a promise to appear. To be fair, on a theft charge, person with no record, reasonable that he would be released on that form of release. Association President Mike Elliott picked him up and drove him home. He was relieved of duty, suspended without pay, and charged criminally. He pled guilty the following year and received 18 months probation. He began and continues to redacted. This is almost certainly treatment for PTSD. He makes a lot of arguments in this about how he should keep his job because he suffers from depression and PTSD. And I have sympathy for people who suffer from various mental illnesses. But fundamentally, the job of a police officer, very critically, involves not committing crimes. That is the entry level. There's all sorts of other things we'd like you to do as a police officer, like maybe solve some crimes and prevent some crimes and all of those things, but not committing your own crimes is the fundamental building block of what we expect. And if you can't do that most essential thing, whatever the reason is, you can't work as a police officer. There's sort of a duty to accommodate if possible when somebody has a disability, but I don't really know of what policing duties you can expect somebody who is a thief to do. How are his fellow officers supposed to trust this guy? How is the public supposed to trust this guy? Well, we're not. And one thing that I will say is a lot of people have criticized the police chief on this one and said, oh, how is the police chief allowing this? Well, this is actually not a situation where the police chief is at fault. And I'm going to sort of point out here that this is a very... The system goes above the police chief in terms of what, how it protects them. So when we look here, it says the chief has submitted that on the basis of the severity of the misconduct, irrespective of the mitigation of the mental disorder symptoms, he believes there is no place for Constable A.B., again, David Ahlstrom, within the Edmonton Police Service. Constable A.B. has been criminally convicted of 2 serious offenses, while 4 others were withdrawn. He's admitted the 10 counts of misconduct in this hearing. I believe the totality of the misconduct counts is significant. Constable A.B. has done significant, if not irreparable damage to the employer-employee relationship. No kidding. If my employee stole at the office, I would consider that a thing that prevents them from ever working for me again. Full stop. Full stop. Like, no addendums. He has undermined his value as a police officer by demonstrating he cannot be trusted to follow policy, has stolen money on 3 occasions, and falsified or omitted notebook entries. I'm just going to note here. Police officers carry a notebook because you record all the things you do in the day. And your notebook is essential. It is critical. Police officers have to take notes on everything they do, and they will be cross-examined on any discrepancies between their notebook and what they testify to at trial. Your notebook is a critical memory aid. It is a critical document for the proceedings. And if your notebook can't be trusted because you're willing to falsify it, then as a police officer, you are worthless. Completely worthless. And failed to document his actions relating to duties that came to him. He tampered with a homicide crime scene. Again, a horrific homicide scene. Potentially contaminated it and potentially jeopardized a criminal prosecution. And, I mean, just think of the argument. Let's say you find a cigarette in there and you test that cigarette and the DNA comes back to a specific known criminal. Well, great, you're thinking, we've got this guy. Except as defense lawyer, my job is to create arguments for why that might not be. And I might argue, how do we know that this officer didn't track that in, wedged in the treads of his boots when he went in there when he wasn't supposed to be there? How do we know he didn't plant it? Because if he's going in there and stealing money, how do we know he's not planting evidence at the same time? I think that it might make it very difficult to convict somebody under those circumstances. His criminal record and discipline record would become part of his McNeil disclosure package and would seriously and significantly undermine his reliability and credibility as a potential witness. The McNeil disclosure package is that they are required to disclose bad acts by the police, convictions, disciplinary records, that kind of thing that occurred with this officer for a certain period. So I do not foresee that handicap to his ability to be a police officer being overcome very easily. It would certainly haunt him and restrict any operational duties for at least 5 years. That's when they might not have to disclose this as much. I appreciate that the Edmonton Police Service is a large organization with many areas and the ability to accommodate someone with operational limitations, and suspect that they do such accommodations from time to time. And I'm just going to say, how do you accommodate a known thief? You can't put him in the evidence room because plenty of stuff to steal there. You can't put him at the front desk because somebody might walk into the front desk and say, hey, I've got a purse to turn in. And we already know he's willing to loot through a purse for cash and other valuables. You can't put him on arrest duty because he might arrest somebody and loot through their wallet, have a look around, see what he can take. You can't trust him with anything valuable or resaleable, like, say, everything on a police belt. I just don't see what you can trust a thief with in this context, right? It's such an important area. And I mean, what are they going to do? The only sort of idea I have as to where they could, what they could do with him is post him into like a forest and tell him, make sure no one steals any of the pine cones in this deep forest. And the problem is, at the end of the shift, then you have to check his pockets for pine cones. It's insane. So the chief, by virtue of his position on Constable AB, again, David Ahlstrom, continued employment, is not disposed to do so in this case, i.e. he wants him gone. So as much as some people have criticized the chief of police wanted this guy gone. I understand that stance, given it will be the chief who would need to defend that decision to the public, the Edmonton Police Commission, and the citizens of Edmonton. And frankly, I think the public and the police, I will say, as much as some people are going to say this is all bad police, I got sent this story by several police officers, all of whom expressed outrage and basically said, why? Good police officers deserve to work with other good police officers. The only way we make that happen is by getting the bad cops out, and we can't do that if the system protects them. So what happens at the original sort of hearing level? The decision is, it is my decision that a global sanction of dismissal from the Edmonton Police Service is a fair and just result in this matter. And they fired him. So, and that was from Fred Cammons, Chief Superintendent of the RCMP, retired. So an ex-cop fired him. The cops investigated the cops and they actually determined that they did something wrong and that somebody should get fired for it. But that's not the end of the story, unfortunately, because he then appeals. And that appeal goes up to the Law Enforcement Review Board. Now, I'm not going to review the full Law Enforcement Review Board decision because I want to keep this video sort of as short as I can. But they ultimately say that the original decision did not sufficiently consider his PTSD and his depression, and that because of that, instead of getting fired, he's going to get a reduction in rank for 2 years, which is, he's going to get a pay cut. That's it. That's his penalty. And one of the things that was pointed out at the original hearing that I'll flag there, and this is his defense counsel saying, Mr. Nugent submits that case review shows other officers have done similar misconduct and continue to serve. That's horrifying. Like, I know that you are there defending your client, but that is a horrifying statement about the police. All right. So the Law Enforcement Review Board ultimately determines that he should be reinstated with that 2-year reduction in rank. The chief of police is still not happy. And why would you be? You've got a thief on your force that you can't get rid of. So he appeals this up to a higher court, and that court has refused to hear it on the basis that there's no substantial and sort of broader issue of law. And I can see why the court would say that, because this is really just something about this particular cop. But unfortunately, what that means for the public is that we are stuck with a terrible, terrible cop who is straight up a criminal, like convicted criminal, and a thief, and all sorts of things. So his picture's in the thumbnail. Let's bring it up again here. Let's study his picture. If, just so that you know. Because if you ever have to deal with this officer, like let's say you are arrested by this officer, you might be very concerned about your valuables. I think the public should be concerned. And quite frankly, if this officer came to my house to investigate like a break and enter, if my house was, I would say, okay, everyone can come in and have a look except this guy. This guy can sit on my porch. I will trespass him off my property. Assuming he wasn't there with a warrant. And if he was there with a warrant, I'd be very concerned about my property going missing because he's got a history, right? This is the kind of thing that shakes the confidence of the public in policing. We want to know that the police are not going to be offending against us, and especially against us in our most vulnerable moments. The widow of this homicide case had her chances of justice potentially tampered with by this officer. That was her money that was in that house. He stole from the widow of the murder investigation that he was supposed to be helping with. She's probably in hospital reacting to the death of her husband, only to learn that she has been betrayed by the very police officers who were supposed to be there to assist and protect her in these moments. Can you imagine the feeling of betrayal and horror to learn that the police officers who were supposed to protect you have instead been robbing you? I can't imagine. I am like, my heart goes out to this woman because I can't imagine what she went through, and I can't imagine what that whole scenario would have felt like. But I think that the decision by the LERB there fails to consider the public's interest in this, and fails to consider that there is a very pronounced need for the public to be able to trust the police. They should maybe have talked to that widow and said, hey, what do you think about this? All right, so let's talk about the worst part of this story, because you've probably thought it's as bad as it can get, but it can get worse. So he was suspended without pay since 2017. That's a long time. And so during that time, he will have been working doing something else. Whatever job you can get as a convicted thief, because there's a lot of jobs that won't take you if you're a convicted thief. But apparently not policing. So, 7-Eleven might fire you for that. The police department, maybe not so much. But I've ranted about that already. So, because the decision to fire him was ultimately reversed, they, according to my read of things, they're going to have to pay him back pay. And that back pay will probably amount to $500,000. Thereabouts. That was reported by Press Progress that it's going to be about $500,000 payout to repay him for the... Now, keep in mind, he's being repaid for those years where he was suspended, so he did no work during that time, at least not for the police force. He probably did other work, though. He had to do something to pay his bills during that time. So this is going to come to him as a giant windfall payment. Think of what $500,000 would do for your retirement. If I suddenly had $500,000 in the bank, that'd be fantastic, right? Amazing. This officer has essentially profited immensely by committing a crime, and a crime directly against the Canadian public and the people of Edmonton, as well as against specific vulnerable victims. It is insane to me that you can make $500,000 through crime. Crime doesn't pay, we say, unless you're a cop. Something has got to change. This system is broken. The degree to which bad cops are protected and good cops are forced to just hang in the wind and work with these guys is insane. So I think we need to see some I think we need to see some systemic changes. I would start by saying all of those disciplinary decisions and all of those hearings should be a lot more public. There shouldn't be any reg number XXXX. It should be, here's his reg number, here's his name, lets everybody know who he is and what he's facing. And again, David Ahlstrom. And ultimately, I think we need some serious change with the Law Enforcement Review Board. The decision here, I think, tells us that we as the public just can't trust what the results are here. I just don't see how this makes any sense. The police chief can't even fire a thief, a convicted thief. Why is there a review process for this? If you steal from the 7-Eleven you're working at, they will fire you and there is no review process. This is nuts. So, yeah. Anyway, that's my rant. It's shocking to me and it's horrific, and that's where we sit. So, thank you for watching. I hope you found this to be interesting and educational, probably also depressing, but that's the nature of things. Please like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to see more content. Yeah. I also want to thank my Patreon supporters at the $50 level, Canada's National Firearms Association, the CCFR, the Canadian Shooting Sports Association, and Lembus for the Elf, as well as at the $20 level, Lindsay Metcalf, Larry Kalniak, Here's a Coin Legal Witcher, Cameron Johnson, Andrew Elsich, Vicky, and Dorky Dane. Thank you as well to my $10 supporters who will be in the crawl immediately following. Thank you for watching. Hope this has armed you with knowledge. See you next time.